All right, and now this is for another socialist paradise, Michael Knowles from Cuba.
Cuba, very so happy. Cuba, we're always gay. Why don't you plan
I'll see you in CBA.
Hot one and I'll see you in CUBA.
It's where the dark-eyed Stellas light their fellas' panatellas. That's a beautiful cigar. I'm expecting to reap the harvest of cigars here.
I might have brought you back 1 or 1,000 or so. Yes.
So Michael Moore's right. It's a socialist paradise.
It's a total paradise. Who knew? I didn't know that I was a communist until now. I'm really confused about one thing in Cuba. When I walk around liberal places in the United States, left-wing places, I see a lot of Che Guevara T-shirts.
Right.
But when I walk around Cuba, I don't see any Che Guevara T-shirts. I see a lot of American flags.
Mysterious.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that is a mystery. I wonder why that's true. Huh?
It's almost like the people who know anything about communism and have been brutally oppressed by it for 60 years. They don't like it very much. And then a bunch of dummies on college campuses really like it and embrace it.
Do they really wear American flags?
I was in Cuba for 3.5, 4 days.
Okay.
I saw over a dozen people wearing American flags.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
So they're not getting arrested for it, at least that you saw.
It's interesting. I didn't see people getting arrested for it. And also, unlike other communist dictatorships, I didn't see a big clampdown on religiosity. There were a lot of cathedrals, a lot of famous religious places in Cuba.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of people getting shaken down for other reasons, though.
You mean by the cops?
By the cops.
Really?
I'm walking around on the street, and I'm going to be very careful not to mention professions or anything like that because they live in a brutal communist dictatorship.
Got it.
But I talked to a lot of people on the street, a lot of Cubans, even in very poor Spanish, and I saw multiple people getting shaken down by the cops in only my 3 to 4 day trip to Cuba.
You forget what it's like here when, if an LAPD cop pulls me over and I try to give him money, he'll arrest me for it.
That's right. That's exactly right.
As he should, yeah.
It's exactly the opposite in Cuba. And the first thing you notice, first of all, it's a beautiful country. It's a wonderful country. And people will talk to you on the street, but they won't hassle you. They aren't trying to shake you down for money, where in Italy, you have a dozen poor people grabbing onto your legs and you drag them down the street to try to get your money. Not in Cuba. They just talk to you. And I spoke to a number of them and I asked, how are things today? Is it true that there are a lot of reforms going on with all of the American money? Are things really getting better? And what a lot of them told me is, it's the same.
It's the same.
It's the same as it ever was. Now, that isn't entirely true. If you look at a macroeconomic picture, Cuba is liberalizing, or rather was liberalizing, certain sectors of the economy. So private guest houses like Airbnb can be used. They still pay a hefty shakedown to the government.
Right.
I mean, it is a racket. Just as all communist and mafia regimes work, this is a racket.
Communism and the mafia are the same thing.
It's exactly the same
thing.
Yeah. And you see it vividly in Cuba. But even certain private restaurants and private guest houses are a little bit liberalizing. However, last year when Raul Castro announced that he would step down next year in 2018, the economic reforms seemed to kind of fall by the wayside. There was a big pushback from Communist Party officials who didn't like that certain people were making some money now, certain wealth inequalities were growing. Wealth inequality meaning that not everybody
else was getting the money.
Yeah, that's right. Somebody other than them is making any money. Because I don't think people really understand the poverty in Cuba. The government reports that the average salary is $25 a month.
$25 a month.
$25 a month. Now
that'll buy you a mansion, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Not really. You might think so because it's so deeply depressed. But the economy, the Castro regime liberalized tourism in the early 90s once communism fell and they stopped getting their free money from Soviet Russia. So they've had this influx of tourists and prices are expensive. You will never see Cubans walking around the big international hotels, swimming in the swimming pools. It simply does not happen.
So what is a guy, when you talk to people, what's their life like? Are they saying, yeah, we love it here, everything's great, or are they actually complaining about it?
It's awful.
It's awful, yeah.
I asked a number of Cubans on the street what they think of America, what they think of all these Americans coming in and spending a lot of money. And they say the Cuban people love Americans and they love America, and the Cuban government despises America and Americans. But the only people who admire Fidel Castro and Che Guevara and all the other thugs that have destroyed that country and brutalized those people are left-wingers in Western societies and here in America. I did not see any Cubans who had anything but disdain.
Really?
Yeah. A lot of people
it's so frustrating. It is so frustrating to see some clown walking around L.A. in a Che Guevara T-shirt. These are real people, really oppressed.
These are real people, and a lot of them, they wouldn't speak about the government to me. There's a huge fear of political dissent. But for people that I encountered on the street and in squares, and where there wasn't a big fear of getting caught right away, to a man, they despise these people because they've ruined that country and they've ruined these people. And forget even the death squads and the crackdown on dissent. The economy is so terrible there that when you factor in there is a black market, obviously.
Right.
People are having shakedowns and paying people off all the time. But even in that case, the upper 1.5% of Cubans, the 1% of Cuba, makes $12,000 a year. That includes all the party guys. That includes the brutalizers.
Right.
Obviously, the Castros make significantly more. But the majority of the Cuban people make less than $100 a month.
It's insane when you think back on people like Barbara Walters doing that kind of lavishly fawning interview with Fidel Castro, the way they have treated him like a rock star. I mean, these guys are it's really like treating John Gotti like that. I mean, it's all it is. Communism or socialism is a protection racket. Give us your money. I mean, how do they make any money at all? Is it all on the black market? Is that what they do?
A lot of it is on the black market, and there is a schizophrenic experience of going to Cuba because it is a lot of fun. It is a great experience in Havana, and it really does benefit the Cuban people at least a tiny bit when we give them our money, when we tip them well, and when we bring some more resources into that country. And one should not be naive. The government is stealing most of that money. The vast, vast majority of that money is going to that government. However, I was watching a beautiful show in Havana, an amazing Ricky Ricardo, old school Cuban show, and I thought, this is one of the best shows I've seen in years. I'm really enjoying this, and I'm filled with nothing but a deep and profound hatred for Fidel Castro, for what he did to these guys. Yeah. And there is that balance this totally split experience that you're having in Cuba. The people that I met, to a man, were wonderful, warm, just kind and generous people. The question is, should we go? What do we do about the embargo? What do we do about these travel restrictions? Because some people don't know this either. Barack Obama did not end the embargo. He eased restrictions from the executive branch on travel to Cuba. So that question is something we'll have to deal with now. If we look at China, Nixon goes to China in '72. Liberalization opened up in '78, very similar to the liberalization under Raul Castro, which has now been stalled. It seems to me that the Chinese are better off a quarter of a century later because we have opened up trade with them.
And because Mao's gone, I mean that was helpful too. I have to say, by the way, that cigar smells fantastic.
I only have about 100 bazillion of them left, so maybe I'll be able to give you one. There is one really fun thing I did. I'm really filled with this rage a lot at Che and Fidel Castro, and Barack Obama famously stood in front, very dignified, in front of Che Guevara as he was lying through his teeth to the Cuban people and promised that he wouldn't rescind wet foot, dry foot, the policy that allows Cubans who make it to this country to stay here, which he did. But I got to stand in front of Che Guevara, and I got to wear a "Make America Great Again" hat.
Oh,
and
did you bring a picture?
Smoke a cigar. I think we have. There's the photo right there. You tell me which version you prefer. That gave me
Boy,
immense
now
pleasure.
see, now if you're not subscribed to the Daily Wire, you are missing one of the great photographs. This is a Pulitzer Prize level photograph. Michael Knowles smoking a cigar, wearing a "Make America Great Again" hat in front of the big poster of Che Guevara.
La Plaza de la Revolucion. Well, the Revolucion is happening, and my recommendation, I saw a lot of Americans coming, a lot of my friends have gone. I will certainly go back. Tip people very well. You're an ambassador to your country. These people need it much more than you do, and by every dollar you give to a Cuban guy on the street is sticking an eye right in sticking a finger right in the eye of that regime, and we'll see that what will happen next year.
So what happens? What happens when, I mean, I had this experience of going to Oberlin and listening to these people they're oppressed. They're in the middle of Ohio, they're oppressed. They're going to college, a lot of them on government loans, they're oppressed. I'm oppressed because I'm a black man in America, which is, at this point, a joke. I mean, the only thing oppressing you at this point is Democrat values and Democrat programs that keep you enslaved. So what happens when liberals go to this country?
This was an incredible experience. I overheard it on the plane back from Havana, and just from Americans I was talking to around there. They have to tell themselves an absurd fiction to live with themselves for their political philosophies and for their behavior in Cuba. They're left-wingers, and I say, look, the crushing poverty is really depressing, and it's caused by these brutal leftist dictators. And they say, no, this is true. This is a real conversation I had. You don't understand, Michael. There's a black market economy. It's just the government gives them some money, and then they look. You can't trust these Cubans. Direct quote.
Really?
You can't trust these Cubans. They make a lot of money. They're shaking you. You don't even know what's happening. Well, all of the statistics on this tell a completely different story. But the final quote, which I think a lot of left-wingers in America would agree with, is, "But at least they all have jobs."
Oh, God.
Seriously, in America we have unemployment, and who needs air conditioning? Isn't it so nice? We need air conditioning. They don't even need it. They don't even need nice food or sufficient food
and the health care,
survive.
and they have all that free health care too.
I talked to some Cubans about this. I wanted to bring up the Michael Moore question. And I said, well, how are the government services? This is touted by the left in America all the time. And in our broken Spanish, a person that I spoke to responded, yes, we have a hospital here. Thanks to the communist revolution, we have a hospital. Anyone can go to the hospital. Any person, poor, doesn't matter your race or your status, you can go in that and not receive any medicine. You can go to that hospital and receive no service. And that's Cuba for you.
Well, welcome.